The specialist at the gate said it loud enough for the second guard to hear. "You people enlist for the free ride and cry when it gets hard." It was a little before 0600, and the line of cars idled in the cold, with their headlights making tunnels in the exhaust. I was third in the vehicle lane, in an old sedan, the color of a rain cloud, with a travel mug going cold in the cup holder and a garment bag folded across the back seat. I had been on the road since 0400, most of it in the dark, watching the sky go from black to the flat gray that is not quite morning and not quite night, the color of a thing that has not decided what it is going to be yet. My hair was flat. My eyes had the grit in them that comes from a long drive and a short sleep. My jacket was the kind you buy at a discount store and wear until it forgets what shape you are. I looked like exactly what he decided I was, which was a woman with her hand out and a story ready. His name tape said Reinhardt. He could not have been more than 22. He had the particular boredom of a young soldier who has stood the same post for most of a shift and has started narrating the people in the cars to keep himself awake, because a mind left alone in the cold will invent entertainment out of whatever is in front of it. The second guard, a leaner kid whose tape said Nowak, leaned in the door of the shack with a paper cup and grinned at the line the way you grin when someone older than you is about to be made small and it will cost you nothing to watch. There is a kind of grin that is really just relief that the joke is landing on somebody else. That was the grin. I rolled the window the rest of the way down and held out my card. ID, he had said first, and I gave it to him, and then came the speech, unprompted, because a bored man will fill a silence with whatever he already believes about the person in front of him. He had looked at the car, and he had looked at the coat, and he had looked at the hour, and he had assembled a whole person out of those 3 facts, and he was pleased enough with his creation to say it out loud. He was not wrong about the 18-year-old. I want to be honest about that from the very beginning, because the honesty is the whole point of the story, and everything in it turns on that one true thing. He was very wrong about the woman in the car, and I decided, in the second and a half it took to pass the card across the gap, that I was not going to correct him with my mouth. I was going to hand him the truth on a laminated rectangle and let him find it in his own time, on his own screen, in his own words, which are the only words a certain kind of man will ever really believe. He took the card slow, like a favor he was doing me. He turned it once in his fingers, the way people do when they are performing thoroughness for an audience of one grinning friend. He was not reading it. He was letting me watch him hold it. Then he fed it into the reader. The scanner was a squat gray box bolted to the counter, the kind that reads the chip and talks to a database, somewhere well above the pay grade of the man holding the card. It took its time, the way those readers do, the little light blinking, while somewhere a long way off a question was being asked and answered. Nowak was still grinning. Reinhardt was already writing the rest of his morning in his head. I could see it happening behind his eyes. The little story he would tell the next guard about the lady in the beater who thought a sad face and a hard luck line would get her on post faster than the rules allowed. The box chirped. A line came up on his screen. The grin beside him died first. Nowak could not read the screen from where he stood, but he could read Reinhardt's face, and whatever crossed that face emptied the younger one out, like a plug had been pulled from the bottom of him. Then Reinhardt read his own screen a second time, because the first time the brain refuses a thing it did not order, and the color went out of him from the top down, forehead to jaw, the way water leaves a glass when you tip it slow. I have watched a great many faces do a great many things over the years. It is most of what my job is, in the end, watching what people do when the information rearranges itself in front of them. I had never watched one drain that fast. He did not hand the card back. He set 2 fingers on it against the counter, gently, like it might slide off the edge of the world if he let go of it. "Sir," he said, quiet, and then heard himself say it, the wrong word for the person in front of him, and did not correct it, because he no longer trusted himself to choose a word. "I need you to hold the gate." I had not raised my voice. I had not said one true thing about myself out loud. I had handed a bored young man a card, and the card had done the rest, and the gate was already changing around me while I sat in my old car with my cold coffee and let it change. That is the whole trick of my life in one sentence. If you want it early, I carry the truth somewhere it cannot be argued with, and I wait. Here is the part the specialist could not see, and the part I have spent the better part of a career making sure that almost no one ever sees. There is a whole section of what I do that I cannot describe to you, not because it is dramatic, though people always want it to be dramatic when they find out it exists. I cannot describe it because it is not mine to describe, and because the value of it evaporates the moment it is spoken aloud in a parking lot to a stranger. I am a Chief Warrant Officer 4 in the United States Army. My branch is military intelligence. I read patterns for a living, the kind that live inside enormous quantities of ordinary information, the kind that most people would look at all day and see nothing but noise, static, the gray hiss of too much happening at once. What I carry does not fit on a card. And yet, that morning, enough of it fit on the card to stop a bored young man cold, because the system had reasons to want a certain kind of person to move quickly, and I was that kind of person, and the card knew it, even though the coat did not show it. I came up through the enlisted ranks first. Prior enlisted, we call it, or if someone wants to be fond about it, a Mustang. An officer who started at the very bottom and walked up the whole staircase, one cold step at a time, without any of it being handed down. I know what the gate looks like from the outside of the shack, because I have stood inside the shack. I have checked cards in the cold. I have been the bored one narrating the line. I know what it is to be 20 and certain and completely wrong, all in the same afternoon, and I have never forgotten how comfortable that feels from the inside, how much wrong certainty feels exactly like knowledge until the moment it does not. I enlisted in 2001. I was 18. I trained as an intelligence analyst because a test said I had the shape of mind for it, and because the alternative was a town I could not wait to leave. I made specialist. I sat in rooms full of screens until the patterns started speaking to me in a language I could not have taught anyone, because I could not fully explain it to myself. In 2009, the Army selected me for warrant officer, and I traded the enlisted path for the narrow one, the technical one, the one where you are supposed to be the person in the room who actually knows the thing, as opposed to the person who commands the people who know the thing. From there, it was deployments and schools and clearances stacked on clearances and special access work that I will describe to you only as the reason I am careful about doors. It took me from specialist to Chief Warrant Officer 4 across a stretch of years that felt, while I was living them, like one very long Tuesday. So I did not enjoy what was happening to Reinhardt. I want that on the record too. But I also did not stop it, because I had learned something a long time ago that most people never learn, which is that being underestimated is not always a wound. Sometimes it is a kind of cover. Sometimes it is the safest coat you own, and you would be a fool to take it off just to feel briefly correct in front of a stranger. People ask why I drive an old car. They assume it is thrift, and there is some thrift in it, because a broke childhood teaches your hands a lesson your bank account never fully unlearns, no matter how long the direct deposit has been steady. But mostly I drive the old car on purpose. I could present differently. I could roll up to any gate in the country looking like exactly the sort of person you wave through without a second thought, and I would move faster, and I would be treated better, and I would give away, for that convenience, a small piece of the one advantage I have spent almost 25 years building, which is that almost no one who looks at me guesses correctly what they are looking at. In my line of work, being forgettable is not an insult. It is a skill, and it is a shield, and I have sharpened it on purpose. The most useful thing I own is not my clearance. It is the habit of being the least interesting person at the gate. I have watched colleagues who cannot stand it. Good officers, sharp as anything, who bristle when a stranger writes them off, who reach for the rank the second a checkout clerk is short with them, who cannot let a wrong assumption stand for even the length of a grocery line. I understand the impulse better than they think I do. There is a heat that comes up the back of your neck when someone decides who you are before they know a single true thing about you. I have felt it my whole life, starting a long time before the uniform, starting in a town where people had decided who my family was before I was old enough to disagree. I have simply made a different bargain with that heat than most people make. The bargain is this: I let them be wrong. I let them be wrong loudly and confidently, and in front of an audience if that is how they want it, and I hold my correction the way you hold a card face down at a table. Because the moment I explain myself, I have taught the room what I am, and I would rather the room stay ignorant and comfortable and, above all, honest. People show you exactly who they are when they believe no one important is watching. Reinhardt was showing me who he was, in full, for free, in the cold, and the kindest and the wisest thing I could do for both of us was to keep watching and keep quiet and let the lesson build its own weight. So I let him be wrong. For one more minute, being wrong about me was the safest thing in that guard shack, and it was safest for him most of all, though he did not know it yet. I sat there in the cold with the exhaust curling up past my mirror, and I let the minute run because I had learned once, a long way from that gate, in a plywood room that smelled of burnt coffee, exactly what it costs when the wrong person decides too quickly that they already know everything worth knowing about a situation. I had paid the tuition on that lesson in a currency I have never gotten back. That was in 2007. I was 24 years old. I was a specialist then, an analyst in an operations bay overseas, in a building that was mostly plywood and cable and the smell of burnt coffee that never quite left the walls, no matter how long the pot sat empty. My job was to sit with more information than any one person should have to hold in their head and find the thread in it. Not the loud thread. The loud thread finds itself. My job was the quiet one, the pattern that does not want to be seen, the small wrongness that only shows itself if you have been staring long enough to know exactly what right is supposed to look like, so that the moment right stops happening, the absence rings like a bell only you can hear. I want to keep this part plain because it does not need decoration and because the people in it deserve to be spoken about plainly and not turned into a scene. Over about 10 days, I had been watching a particular stretch of road, and the ordinary life that moved along it, the way people came and went, the little routines that a place keeps without ever knowing that it keeps them. A market that opened at a certain hour, children who walked a certain way to a certain place at a certain time. The unremarkable rhythm of people simply living, which is the truest clock there is, because people cannot help keeping it. And the rhythm changed. Small things. The market thinned out early one day and then earlier the next. The children were not where the children were supposed to be. A pattern of movement that had held for days stopped matching itself. Nothing you could put in a photograph. Nothing that would survive being said out loud to a skeptical man in a hurry. Everything you could put in a sentence, though, if someone would only let you finish the sentence and sit with it for the length of time the sentence deserved. I did not want to be right about it. People assume that an analyst who catches something feels a kind of triumph, and it is the opposite of that. I checked it 4 times. I went back through the days I had already logged, and I tried, honestly and hard, to talk myself out of what I was seeing, because I knew exactly what raising it would cost in a room full of people who had already decided I was junior, and nervous, and a little too hungry to matter. I wanted the pattern to dissolve when I looked straight at it. I wanted the market to fill back up in my notes, and the children to be where the children were supposed to be, and the whole thing to turn out to be my own tired eyes inventing a shape in the static at the end of a long shift. It did not dissolve. That is the thing about the real ones. They do not get weaker when you stare at them. They get clearer and quieter and more certain until you are the only person in the building who can hear the bell, and the bell will not stop, and you understand that you are going to have to walk across the room and say the thing out loud and be the nervous young analyst that everyone already thinks you are. So I logged it one more time, cleanly, in the plainest language I owned, stripped of every word that might sound like fear or ambition, because I had already learned that much about how the world receives a warning. I knew, even then, that the way you say a true thing helps decide whether anyone will hear it. I took out every adjective. I took out myself. I left only the pattern and the days and the road and the single flat recommendation at the bottom, the one sentence I believed with my whole chest. And then I carried it up the chain, in the middle of a long night, to a tired man with 100 louder things pulling at him from 100 directions, and I learned that stripping the fear out of your voice does not help you at all if the person listening has already decided how much your voice is worth before you ever open your mouth. I wrote it up. I walked it up the chain, which is exactly what you are supposed to do. And I said, as clearly as a 24-year-old specialist knows how to say anything to a man 3 ranks above her at the tired end of a long night, that I did not think that roads should be traveled in the morning, and that I believed the change I was seeing in the ordinary life around it was the kind of change that comes before a thing, not after it, the kind that means the people who live there already know something that we do not. The senior officer in the bay that night listened to about half of it. I could see him deciding, the same way I would watch Reinhardt decide almost 20 years later at a gate on the other side of the world, that he already knew what he was looking at, and that what he was looking at was a nervous young analyst reading far too much into far too little, wanting to matter, seeing ghosts in the noise. Stay in your lane, specialist, he said. Let the grown-ups read the map. He was not cruel about it. That is the thing I have never been able to make people understand when I tell this, and I do not tell it often. He was not a villain, he was tired, and he was busy, and he had 100 things pulling at him from 100 directions, and I was one more voice in a room full of louder voices, and I did not yet have anything about me that made me impossible to wave off. I had a pattern, and a feeling, and a rank that told everyone in the room precisely how much my pattern and my feeling were worth, which was not enough. The rank did the deciding before the man ever had to. I stayed in my lane. I have thought about that lane every single day since. The patrol went out the next morning, down the road I had asked someone to hold, and a young soldier named Eli Sorensen did not come back. He was 19 years old. I did not know him well, I knew his name from a roster, and his face from the chow line, the way you know 100 faces that all blur into the general warm sense of the people you are there to stand alongside. He had a way of tipping his head back when he laughed. That is the one specific thing I kept. After that morning, his name did not blur anymore, and it has never blurred again, and I have carried it now for longer than he was alive. I'm not going to describe that day beyond what I have said, because the details are not mine to hand around for effect, and because the shape of it is the only part that matters here. A young man went out a door I had asked someone to keep shut, and the door stayed open, because the person with the authority to shut it had decided quickly and without any malice at all that he already knew everything worth knowing about the girl who was asking him to shut it. It was not hatred that opened that door. It was certainty. I have feared certainty more than almost anything ever since, my own most of all. I did not handle it well. I was 24. I had done the thing you are trained to do, and it had not been enough, and I did not yet have the framework to understand that being right and being heard are two entirely separate accomplishments, and that the world does not pay out on the first one at all. It pays out only on the second. You can be right in a locked drawer for the rest of your life, and no one will ever come collect it from you. The person who handed me that framework was a master sergeant named Gloria Fenimore. She was 44 then, which felt ancient to me at the time, and now feels like roughly the middle of a life. She found me afterward, in the worst stretch of it, in the days when I was somewhere between quitting and coming apart at the seams. And she did not comfort me, because she was too good a leader to insult me with comfort I had not earned and could not use. She told me the truth instead, which is the only gift that outlasts the person who gives it. You were right and it did not matter, she said. I want you to really hear that, because you're going to want to hold on to being right like it is a medal, and it is not a medal. It is not even the job. Being right is the cheapest thing in this whole building. Every fool in here is right about something. Being someone they cannot wave off, that is the job. Nobody handed me a room in my life. I walked into it every single day for 20 years until they could not pretend I was not standing in it. You want the next Eli to come home, you stop trying to be right at people who are not listening. You go and become someone they physically cannot ignore. That is not loud. That is not shouting. That is slow. Go be that. Then she went back to work, because that is what she did, and she left me sitting there with a dead boy's name in my mouth and a set of instructions I did not fully understand yet, but somehow already knew I would spend the rest of my life carrying out. I understood them eventually. It took 19 years, and a wall of clearances, and more schools than I could list for you if I were allowed to, and it started in a plywood bay that smelled like burnt coffee, with a master sergeant telling me to stop shouting at the room and start earning it, one slow step at a time, until the room could not be a room without me in it. Back at the gate, in the gray cold, the ground moved a second time. Reinhardt had his hand up now, not to me, but to the cars behind me, the flat raised palm that tells a line of vehicles that nothing is going anywhere for a moment, and no one should ask why. He had picked up the phone in the shack. He was saying something into it that I could not hear and did not need to hear, because I had watched the shape of that call play out from more than one side of the counter over the years. He was calling for someone senior. He was calling for the person whose job it is to walk out when a young soldier gets a result on his screen that is above his pay grade to interpret and, honestly, above mine to explain to him even if I had wanted to. The person who came out was a staff sergeant. Her name tape said Brubaker. She was the sergeant of the guard, 30 or so, squared away in the specific way that people are when they have decided somewhere along the line that competence is the only kind of dignity that cannot be taken away from you by anybody. She came out of the guard building with the mild irritation of someone pulled off a warm task to solve a problem she assumed was going to be small and stupid, the way most gate problems are small and stupid, a lost decal or an expired pass or a civilian in the wrong lane. She leaned into the shack and read the screen. I watched her posture change. It is a specific thing, and I have seen it enough times to know it on sight. The way a good non-commissioned officer straightens when the information rearranges itself in front of her. It is not fear. Fear slumps. This was the opposite of a slump. It was recalculation, the whole body coming to attention around a fact that had just moved everything else in the picture. She read the screen once, and then she read it again, the way you read the second line of an order that changes the meaning of the first line. And then she stepped out of the shack and came to my window herself, on her own feet, and her entire manner had reorganized around a single new piece of information. "Chief," she said, "I am very sorry. We are going to get you moving right now." She did not ask me to confirm anything. She did not ask for a second form of identification. She did not ask me to explain myself, which was the mercy in it, because there was nothing I could have explained that would have been as persuasive as the thing she had already read. The card had told her more in the reading than I could have told her in an hour of talking, and that is precisely why I carry the truth on a card, and not in my mouth. A card cannot be argued with. A card does not sound like a hard luck story, or a nervous young analyst, or a woman trying to make herself important in a parking lot. A card is simply true, and it is true in a language the machine speaks, and the person cannot fake. And it had just done in 4 seconds what, 19 years earlier, all of my careful, correct, exhausted sentences could not do at all. Nowak had stopped grinning entirely. He had flattened himself against the inside wall of the shack, trying to become part of the architecture of the place, the way the very young do when they realize that the small cruelty they were enjoying a minute ago has turned out to be attached to something with a great deal of weight behind it. Reinhardt could not look at me at all. He was standing at something close to attention, staring at a fixed point somewhere over the roof of my car, holding my card out toward me now with an arm that was not quite steady, waiting for me to take it so that he would not have to be the one still holding it. I took it back. I put it in the console. I said nothing because there was nothing to say that would have made the moment any smaller, and because I did not yet know for certain whether I wanted it smaller. Brubaker keyed her radio and said something short into it, and the barrier at the head of the lane lifted, the long yellow arm swinging up and locking against the gray sky with a sound like a latch giving way. The lane was clear in front of me. Behind me, a line of drivers, who had no idea what had just happened, sat in their warm cars, wondering only why the line had stopped and started, living the ordinary morning that it is my entire profession to protect and never notice and never be thanked for protecting. Nobody was smirking now. And here's exactly where the easy thing appeared, sitting right there on the counter next to the scanner, offered to me for nothing. I could end this young man's morning with a single sentence. I could probably end a great deal more than his morning. A chief warrant officer. 4 with the flag that had just come up on that screen, standing at a gate where she had been publicly written off as a benefits chaser by a specialist in front of a witness and a line of cars, would not have to raise her voice or file a single piece of paper to make the rest of Reinhardt's week, and possibly the rest of Reinhardt's enlistment, quietly disappear. I would only have to look mildly troubled and say, to exactly the right person, that I had some concerns about the professionalism at the main gate this morning. That is all it would take. The system would do the rest on its own. The system loves a clean story with an obvious villain and a wronged party of sufficient rank, and I had just been handed both parts of that story, gift-wrapped, at 0600, by the villain himself. And everyone in that shack knew it. That was the part that genuinely surprised me. How completely and how fast the temperature of the place had inverted. A minute ago, I had been the object of a joke, the punchline, the lady in the beater. Now I was the weather in the room, and everyone was watching the sky. Brubaker was watching me the way you watch a senior officer who has been wronged and has not yet decided how much of the debt she intends to collect. She was, I could tell, already fully prepared to hand Reinhardt to me. She would have done it cleanly and without a flicker of hesitation, because from where she was standing, the math was very simple, and making it right meant putting the person who caused the problem on the wrong end of the consequences of it. "Chief," she said, low, so the younger ones would not hear it, leaning down toward my window. "Say the word and he is off this gate today. This shift. I mean that. You should not have had to sit there and listen to that. Not from a specialist, not from anybody." She meant it kindly. She meant it as loyalty to me and to the idea of a gate that treats the people who come through it correctly. And she was not wrong that I should not have had to sit through it. Nobody should have to buy their way onto their own post with their dignity. Everyone in that shack knew what a chief warrant officer with that flag on her card could do to a specialist who had guessed wrong out loud in front of witnesses. I knew it best of all. That knowledge, the sheer easy availability of it, the way it sat there already loaded, was the entire temptation, and anyone who tells you the temptation is not real has never sat in the warm seat with the cold card in her hand and the whole room leaning toward the ending they have already decided she deserves. And I will be honest with you about it, because this whole thing is honesty, or it is nothing at all. I sat there for a second, and I let myself want it. I am not a saint, and you do not come up through nearly 25 years of being underestimated without keeping a private ledger somewhere of every person who ever did it to you, whether you ever mean to collect on the ledger or not. For one clean second, I let myself feel exactly how good it would be to watch this particular morning close over this particular young man the way one cold morning had once closed over me. The wanting is not the sin. The wanting is just being a person. What you do in the second after the wanting, that is the only part any of us is ever really tested on. And most of us fail it quietly, a little, on most days, and then call the failure justice so we do not have to look at it too closely. I looked at Reinhardt, 22 years old, certain of everything a minute ago, and now certain of one single thing only, which was that he had ended himself at a gate, in the cold, in front of a woman he had misjudged so completely that the misjudging had taken on a size, a mass, a gravity of its own. He was not thinking about me anymore. He had left me behind entirely. He was thinking about his squad leader and about his mother, and about the version of his life that he had assumed was still fully available to him at 0555, and that he was now certain had quietly closed on him at exactly 0600, while he was performing thoroughness with a card for an audience of one grinning friend. I knew that boy. Not him specifically, but the broke kid underneath the uniform, the one who had joined up for reasons that were not noble, and were not shameful either, just true and ordinary and human. The one who talked too loud when he was bored, because talking too loud is what you do when you are 18 years away from a plywood bay and have not yet had the single day that teaches you, permanently, what your words can cost when they land on the wrong person at the wrong hour. I had been that kid. I had been exactly that kid, standing at a counter somewhere, being loud and sure about something I only thought I understood, before the world got around to correcting me. The room leaned toward the easy ending. I did not lean with it. I made the decision the way I have learned to make the ones that actually matter, which is quietly, and without any spectacle at all, because spectacle is for people who need an audience in order to feel that they have done something. I did not need Reinhardt afraid of me. Afraid is a cheap result. It does not last, and it does not travel, and it does not improve a single thing about the person carrying it. Afraid would have felt satisfying for about the length of the drive to headquarters, and then it would have curdled, the way it always does, into the private knowledge that I had used a card to make a scared kid smaller after spending my entire life quietly resenting every person who had ever used what they had to make me smaller. I would have become, for one warm and satisfying minute, the senior officer in the plywood bay. I have spent 19 years making sure I never become him. I was not going to trade all of that for one specialist at one gate on one cold morning. "Sergeant," I said, "stand down. He stays on the gate." Brubaker blinked. It was not the answer the math predicted, and she was too honest to hide that it surprised her. "Chief, I really do not think you should let this go without." "I'm not letting it go," I said. "I am doing something else with it." "Stand down." She stood down. "That is the thing about a genuinely good non-commissioned officer. You can watch her disagree with you and obey you in the very same breath, and file the disagreement away somewhere she can retrieve it later if she ever needs it." And I respected her more, not less, for the fact that she did not pretend to like the order. She stepped back and put her hands behind her and became a wall, and let me do whatever it was I had decided to do. I want to tell you that it was pure principle, the choice I made in that half a minute, but it was not only principle, and I have stopped pretending that it was. It was memory. Every single time I have had power over someone who did not have any over me, I have felt the plywood bay come into the room with me, and I have watched, from the inside this time, from the seat of the one with the standing, how astonishingly easy it is to be the tired and certain man who does not have to be cruel in order to do a great deal of lasting harm. He was not cruel to me in 2007. He was simply sure and busy, and he had the standing to make his sureness stick to the day, and a boy died on the far end of it. I have never once wanted to be trusted with that kind of standing and then turn around and use it the way it was used against me. The whole reason I climbed the staircase was so that I would be in the room the next time the bell rang. It was not so that I could clear a guard shack out with a card. A person who would end a specialist's career to feel briefly avenged at a gate has no business being trusted with anything quieter or heavier than that, and I have been trusted with a great deal. That is a good deal quieter and a good deal heavier, and I intended to go on deserving it. Then I looked at Reinhardt and I told him one true thing, because I had decided that one true thing given freely would do far more for the both of us than one career taken cleanly. "Specialist," I said. "Look at me." He looked at me. It cost him something to do it. "I did enlist for the college money, that part you said, out loud to your friend. That was true about me. I was 18, and I was broke, and there was no money in my house for anything at all, and the army was the only door that was open to me, and I walked through it partly because it paid for school, and partly because I could not wait one more year to get out of the town I was born in. You were right about the girl. You were just about 25 years late to meet her, and she is not driving this car anymore." I let that sit in the cold for a second, and I watched it land. So, be careful what you decide about the person in the old car. You are the first thing anyone sees when they come onto this installation. You are the door. Every single day, you are the door. I would much rather you be a good door than a frightened one. Do you understand what I am telling you?" "Yes, Chief," he said. His voice did the thing a young voice does when it is holding something back with both hands and losing the grip. "Good," I said, and I put the car in drive. I drove through the gate I had very nearly been turned away from, and I left the specialist standing at his post. And I did not look in the mirror to watch him process any of it, because looking would have been for me and not for him. And the entire point of the decision I had just made was that this one was not going to be about me. It was going to be about the next old car and the next stranger in it, and the version of Reinhardt who would be standing at that window when it rolled up. The headquarters building was the plainest building on the installation, which is very often how you can tell where the actual work happens. The important buildings do not announce themselves. Colonel Ostrander met me himself at the door, which told me something before he had said a single word, because a colonel does not come down to meet a warrant officer at the door unless the warrant officer is a piece of a problem he has been unable to finish without. He was 50, maybe a year or two past it, with the gray, unhurried steadiness of a man who has stopped being impressed by nearly everything except competence, and who has learned, over a long career, to be very impressed indeed by that. He shook my hand and looked at me with an expression I had not seen at the gate and would not see again for a while. He looked genuinely, uncomplicatedly relieved, the way you look when a thing you have been waiting on for days finally arrives, and it turns out to be real, and it turns out to be exactly what you were promised it would be. "We have been waiting on you since Thursday, Chief," he said. "I am not going to insult you with a slow start or a tour of the building. Half of what we cannot solve in this place right now is the half you read in your sleep. I have people who can brief it to you. I do not have anyone who can see it. That is the whole reason you are standing here. That is the only reason I came down to the door. I told him I would get to work, because that is the only correct answer to a sentence like that, and because it also happened to be the true one. He did not ask me about the gate. He did not know about the gate, and he would never know about it, because it was not the kind of thing that travels up to a colonel's office on its own, and I was never going to be the one to carry it there. He asked me instead about a stack of things I am not going to describe to you, and I looked at the first of them over his shoulder while he was still talking, the way I have never been able to stop myself from doing, and I felt the old familiar thing begin to happen, the room going quiet around a shape that only I could see yet. That is the feeling I traded a more ordinary life for. That is the feeling the gate could not have guessed at in 100 years of scanning cards. A tired woman in a discount jacket looks at a wall of noise that has already defeated a building full of good and capable people, and something in the noise leans toward her and shows her the edge of itself, and she is, for the first time all morning, entirely home. There is no ribbon for that. There is only the quiet, and the shape, and the work. I thought about the gate on the walk to my new office, down a plain hall behind a plain door. The gate had seen a benefits chaser in an old car, a woman with her hand out and a story ready. The colonel had seen the person he could not run the problem without, the one he had been counting the days for. Both of them had been looking at the same woman in the same discount jacket on the same gray morning with the same flat hair and the same grit in her eyes from the same long drive. The only real difference between the two of them was that one of them had read the card and one of them had read the coat and had been satisfied with the coat and had stopped there. That is the whole thing, really. That is the entire lesson of my life, compressed down and handed to me twice in one morning at a single gate. People will look at the coat and be certain. Certainty is fast, and it is comfortable, and it asks nothing of you. The card is quieter, and it is truer, and it takes longer to reach, and most people never bother to reach for it at all. They stop at the coat, and they build a whole person out of the coat and the hour in the car, and they are pleased with what they built. And the ones who stop at the coat are not evil people. That is the part that took me the longest to accept. They are just tired and busy, and sure, the same way a man in a plywood bay on the other side of the world was tired and busy and sure on a night in 2007. And being tired and busy and sure is precisely how a 19-year-old ends up walking out a door that should have stayed shut. I did not mention the specialist to the colonel. There was no reason to, and every reason not to. The recognition that actually matters in my line of work is never loud. and it is never a victory over someone smaller than you. It is a quiet, professional understanding in a plain room between two people who both know the real weight of the work and do not need to perform knowing it for anyone. Ostrander gave me that, plainly, at a door, and I gave it back, and neither of us wasted a single second of it on the gate or the guard or the morning. The person who could not get through the gate was the same person the command could not do the job without. Both of those things were completely true at the same time, all morning, in the same woman, and only one of them was ever going to end up mattering, and it was not the loud one. The aftermath, when it came, moved through the gate, and the guards the way weather moves through a valley, slowly and from a distance, and without asking anyone's permission, and it landed where it was supposed to land, softly, without anyone having to be broken in order for it to arrive. A few days later, I rolled up to the gate again, same old car, same cold hour, the same grit in my eyes from the same short sleep. Reinhardt was on the post. I watched him recognize the car before he recognized me, and I watched him brace, the specific way a young man braces when he sees the person he wronged coming back around and does not yet know which version of them is going to be behind the wheel this time, the one who let it go, or the one who thought better of letting it go. I handed him the card. He scanned it without any of the theater this time, quickly and correctly, and without turning it over in his fingers for an audience. And he handed it back, and then he did something I had not required of him and did not expect. "Chief," he said, "why didn't you just tell me who you were that morning? You could have stopped the whole thing in one sentence, and you didn't, and I have been trying to figure out why for 3 days." It was a better question than I had expected from him, and it had a better man behind it than the one who had made the speech, and I decided to answer it honestly, because he had earned an honest answer by being decent enough to still be bothered by it days later, when he could easily have just been relieved and moved on. "Because who I am is none of your business at a gate specialist," I said. "That is not an insult. That is the actual answer, the whole answer. My name and my rank and what my card says and where I have been, those are not the thing you are standing here guarding. Whether you are decent to a stranger in an old car, that is the thing you are guarding. That is entirely your business, and it is the whole of your business. And here is the hard part, the part that matters. You do not get to know who someone is before you decide how to treat them. You have to decide first, in the dark, with no card, with nothing but the coat and the hour and the car in front of you. That is the entire test. Anybody can be decent to the person whose card they have already read. Be decent to the next one before you scan a thing. That is all I ever wanted out of that morning." He thought about it. I could see him actually think about it, turn it over, which is a good deal more than most people ever do with a hard sentence handed to them through a car window. "Yes, Chief," he said, and this time it was not the voice of a scared kid holding something back. It was the voice of a man quietly filing something away in the place where the lessons that actually change you get filed and kept. I did not stay to watch him hold on to it. You cannot supervise that part of another person, and trying to only ruins it. Either the thing takes root in someone or it does not, and standing over him to make sure that it did would have turned it right back into fear, which was the one result I had already gone out of my way to refuse. So I took my card, and I drove through, and I left him the sentence, and I trusted him with it the same way Gloria Fenimore had once trusted me with a much harder one, which is to say by saying the thing plainly, one time, and then walking away and going back to work and letting it do its slow work on its own. In the dark, where trust is the only thing that ever actually reaches. Nowak, the second guard, had learned the very same thing faster and cheaper, the way the young sometimes do when they get to stand off to the side and watch someone else nearly pay full price for the exact thing they themselves were about to do. He had been grinning at a joke a few days earlier, safe in the belief that the joke was landing on someone else. Now, when an unremarkable car pulled up with an unremarkable person behind the wheel, I watched him lean forward and be careful and correct and human about it, because he had seen, up close and for free, where the other road went, and he had decided, all on his own, that he did not want to travel it. That is two guards who will guess better about the next old car for the rest of their careers. It is not a monument. Nobody will ever carve it anywhere. It is just two young men who will be a little harder to write a stranger off in front of for as long as they wear the uniform. And in my line of work, that is about as close to a monument as a person is ever going to get. My new office was a secure space with a heavy door, the kind that seals with a sound like the building itself taking a breath and holding it. I spend a great deal of my life behind doors like that, in rooms with no windows, doing work that will never have my name attached to it in any place a stranger could ever find. And in the quiet behind that particular door, on that particular first week of a new assignment, I thought about Eli Sorensen and about Gloria Fenimore, the way I always do whenever a new assignment begins, because they are the reason there is an assignment at all. They are the reason I am the flag on the card and not just another correct voice in a loud room. Nobody pins a ribbon on the warning that worked. That is the strangest arithmetic of what I do, and it took me years to stop resenting it and start living inside it. When I am good at my job, the result is that nothing happens. And nothing happening is invisible. Nothing happening does not get a ceremony, or a photograph, or a story anyone tells at a reunion. The entire reward for the catch is a patrol that comes home from an ordinary day, wondering idly why it was such a quiet one, and never knowing and going to sleep. Somewhere out there right now are people alive who will never know my name, who will never know that a tired woman in an old car once read a small wrongness in an enormous field of noise and pushed a warning up a chain and had, this time, unlike the first time, the standing and the weight to make the chain stop and listen. That is the whole shape of the valor in my corner of the army. It is anonymous. It does not photograph. It cannot be told. You have to make your peace with a kind of worth that no one will ever see or thank you for, or it will hollow you out from the inside, one quiet victory at a time. Gloria Fenimore retired a long time ago now. I found her, a few years back, in a small town with a porch and a dog and a life that had gone all the way quiet, and I sat with her on that porch for an entire afternoon and tried to tell her what her one hard sentence in a plywood bay had built across 19 years in a person she had known for only a few months. She waved most of it off, the way the truly good ones always do, made plainly uncomfortable by being thanked for a thing she still considered nothing more than her ordinary job. But at the very end, when I was leaving, she took my hand at the door and she said, "You became someone they could not wave off, and I want you to know that I have thought about you every time the news is quiet, because a quiet day somewhere is the only monument our kind is ever going to get." Then she let go of my hand and she told me to drive safe, and she went back inside to her dog. I sat in the car in her driveway for a while before I started the engine. She had given me the second sentence of my life, and she had waited 19 years to give it, and it was the only ceremony I have ever needed or ever will. I keep a small thing on my desk that I'm not going to describe to you, because it would only ever be a prop to you, and it is not a prop to me. What it means is Eli Sorensen. It means the exact weight of what it costs when the wrong person is certain at the wrong hour, and it means the reason I spent 19 years becoming heavy enough that my own certainty could stop a patrol at a door. He does not know that he did that. He was 19, and he tipped his head back when he laughed, and he went out a door I had begged a tired man to close, and everything I have built since then is, in some way I have finally stopped being ashamed of, a very long letter of apology to a boy who will never get to read it. The apology is not made of words. The apology is a quiet day somewhere for someone who will never know my name, over and over again, for as long as I stay good enough to keep buying them. I have made that peace. It took me most of 2 decades to make it, and I did not make it alone, and I did not make it cheaply. Eli Sorensen bought me that peace, though he never knew he was buying it, and he never got to spend a single hour of his own. He was 19. That is the part I have never fully squared, and I have finally stopped trying to square it. Because some debts are not built to be balanced and paid off and closed. They are built to be carried quietly for the length of a life. So I keep his name where I can see it, not as a wound that I pick at when I want to feel something. As an instruction, plain and permanent. His name is the reason I got out of the old car that cold morning and walked into that headquarters building at all, instead of doing the thing that would have been so much easier, which was to take the insult at the gate as a sign that I was not wanted and turn the car around and drive home and let someone else, somewhere, read the pattern a little less well than I would have read it. Weeks went by, the way weeks do. The work was the work. It was hard, and it was the specific kind of hard that I was built for and have spent my whole life becoming better at. And I'm not going to pretend to you that the recognition of being needed for it, the quiet fact of being the one they could not run the problem without, is not its own deep and private satisfaction. It is. But the small thing that I actually keep out of all of that first month is not the work, and it is not the office, and it is not the colonel at the door. I came through the gate one gray morning near the end of that first month, and this time I was not the car being watched. I was somewhere back in the ordinary middle of the line, forgettable, exactly the way I like to be, And so I got to see what the gate does when it does not know that I am watching it. And I watched Reinhardt wave through an old car ahead of me, a genuinely rough old car with a tired person behind the wheel and too much crammed into the back seat. And I watched him lean down toward the window and say something, and I watched the tired person behind the wheel laugh out loud. He gave them a good morning, and he meant it, all the way down. He did not know I was 3 cars back, watching him be a good door to a stranger who would never know his name and would never know mine, and would drive onto that post a little lighter than they drove up to it. I did not fix that specialist. I want to be very clear about that, because it would be a tidier and a more flattering story if I had. And I have learned across a long career to distrust every tidy story anyone tells about changing another person. I did not fix him. I told him one true thing, and I got out of the way, and I let him decide, in the privacy of his own conduct, what he was going to do with it. The good ones do the rest themselves. That is the only kind of change that ever holds, the kind a person builds quietly on their own, when no one with any authority is standing over them making them do it. The stranger the gate almost turned away had turned out to be the person the command could not do without. The guard who almost turned her away had turned out, given one true sentence in a little room and no punishment, to be a good one. Both of those things came out of the same 4 seconds at the same gate, and only one of them will ever be written down in any place a stranger could find it, and it is not the one that matters most to me. So let me say the last part to you directly, whoever you are, wherever you are hearing this, because I have a suspicion about why this particular story found its way to you. If someone decides who you are before they have bothered to learn a single true thing about you, you do not have to argue with them. You really do not. You do not have to reach for the card and slap it down on the counter and make them feel the full weight of everything they failed to see when they looked at your coat and your hour and your old car. Let them be wrong. It is quieter that way, and it is safer, and it leaves you holding the one advantage they can never take back from you, which is that they still have no idea what they are looking at. Go instead and be so good at the quiet work, whatever your quiet work happens to be, that the truth about you arrives on its own, in its own time, on a screen, or in a plain room, or in a life that turned out steadier and better than the people who wrote you off ever once imagined that it could. And when it does arrive, and the ones who sized you up in a second are standing there in front of you, pale, holding your card against the counter like it might slide right off the edge of the world, do not spend that moment making them small. You will want to. The whole room will lean toward it, and it will feel like it is owed to you, and maybe it even is. Do the other thing anyway. Be the kind of person who is decent to the next stranger in the old car before you have read a single word about who they are. That is the whole thing. That is the entire job. A gate, a card, and a boy's name kept where I can still see it. Quiet and earned, and enough